Welcome back. Cliff Kincaid, the president and founder of America's Survival, and also the director of the Accuracy in Media Center for Investigative Journalism, is our guest. One of the great investigative journalists of our time, needless to say. He is an author of myriad incredibly interesting books, including Why You Can't Trust the News. And one of the places where I think the news has been seriously deficient, and I know you do too, Cliff, is in terms of exposing the American people, particularly back in the first presidential campaign of Barack Obama, to Mr. Obama's very problematic personal history and mentors. Let's talk first and foremost about some recent revelations about one of those mentors, arguably his most important, Frank Marshall Davis.
It's a fascinating story, Frank, as you know, that, as you say, goes back to the first presidential campaign where we discovered that Obama, as a young man in Hawaii, had been mentored by a member of the Communist Party who had been under surveillance by the FBI for 19 years, a suspected Soviet agent, an espionage agent by the name of Frank Marshall Davis. We tried like mad to get this story out. It wasn't very successful. We couldn't even buy advertising on the Drudge Report at the time to alert people to what was going on. And here we are 7 years later, and we're still struggling. But I think by this point, a lot of people see the pieces of the puzzle coming together.
What do you make of it? What kind of influence did an avowed, prominent, and, very much worrying communist like Frank Marshall Davis have in the way of influence and impact on an impressionable young man like Barack Obama?
This is a guy, Davis, who was basically Obama's mentor for 7 to 8 years of his life before he went off to college. And I think he had the major influence over our president, not only in economic terms. Many people think of Marxism as just an economic theory in terms of inequality and all the fighting the capitalists and all the rest of it, which is a hallmark of Obama, but also in terms of cultural Marxism, because many people forget that Davis was also a pedophile. We have the evidence of that. He wrote pornographic books. And we see that in Obama's cultural policies, where during the Pentagon Gay Pride ceremony this year, Frank, you actually had a Pentagon general, a male general, get up there in front of an audience in the Pentagon and introduce his husband. And a transgendered Pentagon employee looked on. Well, needless to say, since then, we've had the gay marriage decision. The White House has been lighted up in rainbow colors. We've seen a cultural collapse in this country that is even more serious than Obama's imprint on our economic debacle and policies.
Yeah, well, and unfortunately, there are national security sort of overtones to all of that, too. Your comment about the Pentagon experience is but one example. Let me ask you about Professor Gerald Horne and his revelations. What bearing does that have on your earlier findings and what we should be making of the kinds of policies the president is now pursuing across this broad front, Cliff Kincaid?
Gerald Horne is a professor at the University of Houston, very interesting fellow, very radical, clearly a Marxist. I recently interviewed him for our show on America's Survival TV on Roku. He is actually the guy, Frank, who back in 2007 had blown the whistle, so to speak, on the fact that Obama had a relationship with Frank Marshall Davis. Now, remember, in Obama's book, Dream from My Father, he only referred to Davis as, quote, Frank. But it was Gerald Horne who said that they were linked, that it was Frank Marshall Davis, and he predicted at this time, and remember, this was at Tamiment Library in New York, where he was speaking on behalf of the Communist Party USA, which had turned over its archives to the library there. He said that Obama would go down in history as somebody who made a difference, just like Frank Marshall Davis did.
Wow. There actually was a video that I've seen recently, Cliff Kincaid, of the young Barack Obama as the editor of the Harvard Law Review, talking about Frank Marshall Davis, rather more explicitly than he did in the book.
That is an interesting development. We found out about that video only recently. That was a video actually from 1995, at the time that Obama's book Dreams from My Father came out. This almost came out of nowhere, but it was an appearance of Obama at a Cambridge library when he was editor of the Harvard Law Review, in which he openly at that time talked about Frank being Frank Marshall Davis. And he said Frank Marshall Davis had, quote, schooled him on the nature of white racism, basically confirming what we had been reporting all these years. But of course, this video just suddenly surfaced 7 years later.
Cliff, let me just point it boldly here. Do you think that what we've got in the White House, in President Obama, is a kind of Manchurian Candidate, a guy who clearly was imbued with these very radical and anti-American beliefs and policy predilections, and is now implementing them?
I think clearly Obama is a Marxist in terms of economics and cultural policies. It's funny, when I recently interviewed Gerald Horne, I asked him about his speech back in 2007, identifying Frank Marshall Davis and Obama, and I said, what do you think about the impact that he's had? And Horne said, I wouldn't say he is a Manchurian Candidate, but Horne said that at the same time, he couldn't understand why the media didn't put two and two together and figure out that Frank was Frank Marshall Davis back there in 2008. And I said, well, we figured it out. We saw your speech. We reported it. He denied. He said, oh, no. He's not a Manchurian Candidate. And despite what Obama says about Davis schooling him on white racism, that Horne said that Obama really hasn't been that radical. Well, I think Gerald Horne is disinforming, and he's got to be in his heart pretty pleased.
Well, pleased on the one hand, and certainly his view of what would be radical skews the curve, doesn't it? Hey, Cliff, let me turn to one other topic. And again, Cliff Kincaid is our guest from Accuracy in Media and American Survival. You are one of the country's living authorities on various communist operations and their implications. Very quickly, I've been talking with John Tsipras, one of our experts on Greece, about the proclivities of the government of Greece at the moment, and in particular, the possibility that if in fact things don't work out with Europe, which seems likely at the moment, there may be a new effort made with the Russians and Chinese to prop up Greece's economy and political system. What are your thoughts on that quickly?
I think that's clearly the case, and people ought to remember that it's not just the fact that Greece is a small country, 11 million people. The fact is that Greece is a strategically located country and member of NATO. I believe that Alexis Tsipras, the prime minister, is basically a Russian agent of influence. Putin's got control of that country today.
And if he does, the implications of this are all the more dire because in NATO's southeastern flank, we're not exactly braced up by Greece's neighbor Turkey, which is also in rather unfriendly hands. Cliff Kincaid, as always, your insights into these important matters, and of course the clarity with which you lay out your case distinguishes your investigative reporting and your various books. We appreciate so much what you do. Keep it up and come back to us again very soon. I hope the rest of you will come back to us again tomorrow. Same time, same station. Until then, this is Frank Gaffney. Thanks for listening.